Folks, a shocking story out of Kansas City, Kansas. A longtime cop there has been terrorizing black folks in that city. Yesterday, he was finally arrested for his heinous actions, this time by the FBI. I'm talking about this former police detective, Roger Golubski. Folks, he is facing 6 counts of civil rights violations. He is 69 years old, retired in 2010 after working for the department, for the Kansas City Police Department for 35 years. The FBI have been investigating allegations that Golubski, who is white, sexually assaulted black women in the city and exchanged drugs for information during criminal investigations. He could be sentenced to life in prison if convicted of any of the counts. A pretrial hearing is scheduled for October 12th. Joining me now is Lora McDonald. She's executive director of More Squared from Kansas City, Missouri. Glad to have you on the show. We were there in Kansas City. This guy came up, and let's be clear. Was he in? First of all, people don't understand. There are 2 different Kansas cities: Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. So he was an officer in Kansas City, Kansas, correct?
In Kansas City, Kansas, yes, the smaller of the 2 cities.
Okay, and in looking at these stories and seeing these allegations of him setting people up. One woman who came out publicly testified that she was raped multiple times by this guy. And folks said, why didn't you call the cops? And she said, because he was the cops.
Right.
So just share with folks, again, how evil this man really is.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mr. Martin. Yes, he's Detective Roger Golubski was with the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department for 3 decades. And in that time, from the 80s to 2010, when he retired, he simply terrorized the black community. He seemed to prey upon lower income and more vulnerable black women, oftentimes women who were drug addicted, or one of the young women in the allegation was actually a minor who was in foster care at the time when he raped her.
Wow. And nothing was done?
Nothing was done, Mr. Martin. Not only was nothing done, he had assigned to him at one time his partner in the field for many years as a detective, went on to become the police chief and continued to deny these allegations, even though we believe that that person was one time sitting in his squad car while one of these 2 victims was being raped by Golubski inside her house. Former Chief Ziegler was seated in the squad car in her driveway, she says.
And not just with the rapes, he was setting people up.
Absolutely.
People who went to prison that he set up for crimes they did not commit.
Absolutely. We know for a fact that Lamont McIntyre was framed by Roger Golubski, and he was exonerated in 2017. I was in the courtroom that wonderful day when Lamont finally got to be free. I've known Lamont's mother for some 20 years, and she was one of his first victims, one of Roger Golubski's earlier victims that we know about. And he went on to frame Lamont for a double homicide in Kansas City, Kansas, that he did things like, Mr. Martin, he actually had 3 of her family members' photos in a photo lineup. So it was Lamont and a brother and a cousin. And basically they had no choice but to pick one of Rose McIntyre's loved ones in the photo lineup. And then he would use some of the women who he would coerce in the streets through drugs, like street prostitutes. He would use them as what people call snitch witnesses to come in and testify and identify people like Lamont in these cases. So we believe we know of multiple men right now who are incarcerated who we believe that he framed in similar type situations. 2 of them, Celester McKinney and Brian Betts, have evidentiary hearings on early October. It's like October 4th and 5th. And we just, pray that this helps them with their release. They've been incarcerated for nearly 2 decades.
Wow, absolutely stunning. And so many folks in this community relieved that he finally has been arrested.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We celebrate on one hand. We at More Squared, we work against mass incarceration day in and day out. But when somebody like this has fueled the system of mass incarceration, I've got to say it was delightful to see that man's mugshot instead of his lovely police photo that we've been seeing for 3 decades in the news.
Lora McDonald, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And we'll be watching to see what happens next in this case.
Thanks for all of your attention to Kansas City and the Black community here, Mr. Martin. We really appreciate your service to us.
Thanks so much. I certainly appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Folks, going to bring my panel right now. Matt Manning, civil rights attorney. Also, Monique Presley, legal analyst, host of Make It Make Sense with Monique Presley. Xavier Pope, host of Suit Up News, owner of the Pope Law Firm. Glad to have all three of you here. The thing, Matt, that jumps out with this is folks in that city, they've been yelling, screaming for years, this man is evil. This man needs to be arrested. And nothing was done. But it was the constant public pressure that kept the attention and focus on the FBI, and finally he was arrested.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Roland, because what you see in these circumstances is the police policing themselves. And that's inherently a problem, right? The fact that there were 3 decades of complaints against him and then his partner became the chief shows you a lot of those institutional problems that people have when they're trying to vindicate their constitutional rights and wrongful convictions against the police, because the police are investigating themselves. So I'm glad that there was ultimately triumph for the victims in this case with the indictment and that he's going to be held to task. But it speaks to a larger systemic issue both there in Kansas City and across the country, where police are able to close their phalanx and make sure that their own aren't prosecuted and these instances aren't investigated. So I'm glad that this shows that this kind of thing does happen. And what I would hope for is that Mark Dupree's office there in Wyandotte County is going to just do a wholesale review of all of the convictions that Golubski was involved in, because there are surely people flying under the radar who will be sitting in jail and have sat in jail for a very long time behind these kinds of heinous acts.
Monique, I have said on this show many times that the White House has failed in regards to really giving due credit to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. This guy was arrested on civil rights violations. The work that Christian Clark is doing in that department is huge, and this really jumps out. In this case here, most people only think in terms of criminal. They were thinking in terms of other areas, but utilizing the civil rights statutes was a way to get this guy arrested.
Right. My 2 words were going to be Kristen Clark. And they still are. I wouldn't couch it in that way. I don't want to start with a negative as if the White House isn't doing something, because what the White House did is appoint and get Merrick Garland in the job and get Kristen Clark in the job. And it takes this Black woman who really across the board we've seen cause an entire department of the DOJ to pay attention to the crimes being committed against Black women that were before being ignored. So we're seeing that happen over and over again. We saw that with what happened with Breonna Taylor and the extent to which they dug into that department. We're seeing that happen here, and she's not going to stop. She's causing the work to get done. So I applaud her leadership, and I applaud this administration for work that has not been done in prior administrations for the quarter century that I've been a lawyer. So I'm thankful.
Xavier, here's why I'm going to call them out. Yes, she was appointed, but this is a perfect example of how the failure to communicate leads people to say, oh, well, what's not being done? There has been a stunning number of indictments, of convictions by this DOJ, and all I'm simply saying is, if this White House would fully embrace that and tell the story, I dare say literally bring them to the White House podium. and to talk about this here because, look, we talk about it, but there's a lot of people who have no idea what's happening with this DOJ and Civil Rights Division. And as Ben Crump has said, arguably, this is the most active Civil Rights Division since the days of Robert F. Kennedy in the 1960s.
Yeah, you have to be able to celebrate the wins that you have.
Yeah.
And show what's going on. And that's why your program exists, Roland Martin. That's why the last guest, thank you for bringing this to the world's attention. And so showing the wins and how many things that have happened since the beginning of this administration. And that needs to be sold to the American people, particularly to African-American communities, who many of them have not thought that this administration has done enough to be able to address social justice issues. Well, maybe if you be able to sell that more to the American public, particularly the African-American public, it would show things are actually getting done by this administration.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is a perfect example of, again, strong prosecution, not allowing these things just to continue. And so that's absolutely, again, great news here. And man, I want to go back to you. Again, we talk about this guy. I mean, this is a walking thug. And this reminds me of the guy in Oklahoma City who got convicted, who raped black women, who was a cop.
Mm-hmm. It's terrifying, and the fact that we're continuing to hear these stories from disparate parts of the country shows you that this is a problem institutionally. I'm not sure if I came through earlier, but there are district attorneys' offices around the country that have set up conviction integrity units for precisely these kinds of situations. And as I was saying before, I hope Mr. Dupree's office there looks at every single conviction that was gotten by, the work of Golubski, because there are surely people sitting in prison right now behind these kinds of acts.
To that particular point, we've seen some folks, Monique, we look at some of these Republicans and what they do. They've been, fighting this. You saw the Attorney General of Virginia dismantle their program. The woman who became the DA in San Francisco, in many ways, dismantled that integrity unit. These are needed, and you have some of these prosecutors who believe, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. But look, no, if somebody did wrong, they should be punished for it. But we know for a fact that there are way too many people who are sitting in jail right now for crimes they did not commit, and it is necessary to have those units look at those cases and study them. And you had, we had Kim Foxx, who was like, yeah, we can't trust these cops. Same thing in Maryland with Alicia Brayboy there. And we have these examples of progressive DAs. Fox News calls them the Soros DAs. But these are the folks who are going, no, double check to ensure if the people did it, they did it, and you don't just believe these corrupt cops.
Absolutely. And when you have a police officer such as this one, who now has been charged with multiple criminal offenses that relate to conduct on the job, then it's really an obligation at that point to do as my colleague Manny said, and investigate all of the prior cases, because nobody just oops and uh-ohs into criminal conduct while under the color of law one time and everything else they do is squeaky clean. The Innocence Project, to your point, Roland, reports over 10,000 wrongfully convicted a year. Those are disproportionately Black and brown, disproportionately men, but Black and brown men. And those are the numbers for instances like we're seeing here, for times when they are coerced into convictions for fear of prosecution and for fear of time that would be greater if they are prosecuted for other crimes. So all of these things, there's oversight that's necessary. The federal oversight that Kristen and her team are doing is wonderful, but I'm going to say again, because I just keep hoping that if I say it long enough, people will listen. George Floyd Justice and Policing Act was supposed to also be a curative in that it would provide federally required oversight for actions such as these. And if we vote, y'all, in November, we can get legislation like that, because we need a real majority in the Senate, and we need to hold the House to make it happen.
Xavier, this is also, again, being resolute in ensuring that there is justice, and it has to continue. And you're absolutely right. Who you vote for changes. Let's be real clear. If this was a Trump DOJ, they ain't investigating cops. Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr were very clear.
Yeah, Roland, I mean, this was something that was rolled back in terms of the Trump administration, and not enforcing any consent decrees. That was the previous in the Obama administration. So this was an administration that attempted to show to its base that, hey, we're not going to do anything to harm, quote unquote, the reputation of police officers, when we all know in African-American communities what that reputation looks like and the accountability the community wants to hold. Now, we talk about the defund the police and all that. Many African-Americans, they want to have policing. But they want to have safe policing, and that safe policing relates to their own well-being in the communities that they live.
They want safe policing, but they also don't want to have thuggish cops. That is absolutely the case. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?